What a strange bucket, but I like it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and today we're going to be talking about Dune Part 1. So let's get into that. Now, with Dune Part 2 coming out next week, I know some people have already seen the movie and done reviews, but I'm not going to be able to see it until March 1st. But I thought I would go ahead and rewatch the Dune Part 1 and do a review on it in preparation for Dune Part 2. Now, to be perfectly clear, I don't have any prior knowledge to Dune besides the first Part 1 movie. And today, when I rewatched it again, was only my second time ever watching Dune Part 1. And I will admit, the original time that I watched it, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I enjoyed most of it, but I just thought that there were some elements missing that I feel like Dune Part 2 is going to excel really, really well. Now, that being said, let's go ahead and get into the positives of Dune. And starting off, since this is my second time watching it, this was definitely a lot more enjoyable of a watch. I feel like the first time I ever watched it, I wasn't focused enough. I didn't catch a lot of the things that were going on, and it ended up being kind of a confusing movie for me at the time, the first time I ever watched it. This time it was a lot more clear. I understood a lot more of the plot points. I understood the kind of powers, the world building, the politics, the economics between all these different planets. And it was just a lot more enjoyable just watching it this time around than the first time. And I really like the world building, right? This movie, to me, at least in my opinion, I haven't seen Dune Part 2 yet, but from what I can tell, is that Part 1 is a lot of setup. That's what this movie feels for me, and that's where it can kind of lose me in certain aspects, in which we'll get into the negatives. But it's just a lot of setup, but the setup that they're doing is still pretty entertaining because you have this world building of all these different kind of galactic properties, and you have, of course, like the Dune planet. You have the main planet where our Timothy Chalamet's character is from, and like the Empire, and all these different races and planets that are trying to get onto this main planet that where most of the story is taking place on because of all the spices. And just the way it explains the whole universe, or not the universe, but their kind of little solar system, galaxies in a way, and what the resources mean to them, how they travel, the different races, the different politics, just the world itself, the way, the tribe that is native to this planet, how they learn to adapt to all the heat and all that stuff. There's just a bunch of things that the movie kind of throws at you and explains to you that is just a lot of setup to what I assume Dune Part 2 is going to be. And I enjoy most of the performance here. Timothy Chalamet, of course, as like our main character, does an exceptional job. You have also, of course, Zendaya, which she doesn't necessarily play a big part in the movie besides being certain visions for Paul's character, and or Paul as a character, I should say. And that's one thing that kind of threw me off. I know when like the trailers were popping up back in the day when this movie was first coming out, like everybody thought Zendaya was gonna be like this huge part that was gonna be in the movie the entire time, and she's rarely in the movie, just besides these few visions and dreams that Paul is having throughout the entire runtime until the end 25-30 minutes is when she actually shows up in real life with not being an actual vision or a dream, where she plays not a big role at all besides giving Timothy Chalamet's character a weapon to prove himself worthy to be part of their tribe. And that kind of sucks, but I do think she's going to have a bigger part for sure in Part 2. So I'm looking forward what kind of role she plays in Part 2. But as of Part 1, she still does a good job of what she's given. She has very little lines, but her presence is still something that's ominous, and the entire time you're wondering what the significance of her character is, especially if you've seen it for the first time. You're wondering what these visions that Paul is having is throughout the entire film. And also enjoy the power of the voice, I think is what they call it, where I'm sure Paul is going to perfect it a lot more in Part 2 from what you can see in the trailer. But in this one, he's still kind of learning from his mother, teaching him how to use his power, the voice, where you can essentially just speak something into existence, and the person you're trying to tell this to will do it without any doubt. If you do it properly, they will obey your command no matter what. And I think that power is such a unique thing that not everybody can do. It's a very unique power that's meant for a certain kind of type of tribe or society that his mother is in, but she's taught him these powers to kind of help himself excel in his role with his family and the new planet, and now what it's gonna be in the new tribe that he's with Zendaya and that whole kind of desert tribe. And my apologies if I'm butchering a lot of the names here and tribes and planets and different politics stuff. Like I said, I've only seen this movie twice, and I'm not familiar with Dune prior to this, so it's still something that I do enjoy the film and what it's trying to go for. And I think once I watch part two, I think it's gonna be such a cohesive experience that it's just gonna excel my knowledge of it a lot more. And again, that's kind of what I like too, is that there's still more world building to be had. It didn't explain everything, it explained kind of the core pieces so you can understand part one. And I feel like it's gonna go a lot more in depth within part two. So I'm excited to see how cohesive this entire story is going to be. And then visually, this movie is just stunning. You know, the all the explosions, the worm monsters, the different like aircraft that they're using, going to the desert storm, just everything in this movie is just visually pleasing and it's epic in scope. And I just enjoy overall everything in the movie when it comes to actual visuals and CGI and all that kind of stuff. It's very enjoyable to watch. And directing, I do enjoy what the director did here and how he kind of put the pieces together. There's still certain aspects that I think are a little slow paced, but overall, I think the story is actually pretty cohesive when you sit down and actually pay attention, not like I did the first time. And when you pay attention, you understand what's going on. It's not a big jumble mess where you kind of get lost and all the different story plot points kind of mixing in together. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the cons for me. And really one of the bigger cons for me is that this movie, like I said earlier, to me feels like a setup movie where when you get Dune Part 2, I hope it doesn't feel like it needs Part 1 to kind of complete it. Even though it is a direct sequel, you still want it to be a standalone movie where you can throw on Dune Part 2 and still understand everything and what's going on, where you don't necessarily need to do a back-to-back feature where you need to watch Dune Part 1 and Part 2. Of course, that's the goal ultimately when you do a kind of like a little marathon or back-to-back feature, because when that cohesive story is completed, it's a lot more epic. But it feels like Part 1 is going to be very reliant on Part 2, and I hope it's not vice versa. Just because Part 1, like I said, in my opinion, feels like it's a lot of setup. Just setting up Timothée Chalamet's character as Paul, trying to set up this tribe in Zendaya, trying to set up all the kind of political wars that's kind of going on between these kind of families. All that is setting up to be for like a big battle that's going to happen in part two from what it seems like. So that's kind of one of my bigger gripes with the movie, and that's why it feels slow paced, because while there is epic scenes and epic fights and there's definitely a lot going on in part one, overall nothing feels like it got really resolved. It was a pretty big cliffhanger. When the credits start rolling on part one, the first time I ever watched it, it caught me off guard. I thought there was like another 30 minutes left of the movie, and it just credits rolling, and I was like, whoa, that's it. Like it just felt, the ending felt a little rushed, and that's where this movie is just a big setup in my opinion, and that's my biggest con for the film. But it's still overall very enjoyable, very beautiful to see. It's still epic in scope, and I hope Dune Part 2 is just excelling that expectation so that when you bring them together, it's a huge, epic, cohesive story. And this is not necessarily a con or a positive, more like a mixed aspect, but a lot of people can compare this to Star Wars. This is this person's version of Star Wars. And you can definitely see that. You can definitely see how that aspect of it is definitely Star Wars like, but I don't think it takes away from it. There's obviously a lot of familiarities with a lot of movies that take place in space that have galactic war and politics and stuff. Because when you look at Star Wars, it's just one big politic movie between these two different galactic forces, and that's kind of what this feels like as well. But it still has its own flavor on it, its own spin, and it's still very enjoyable. And it doesn't take away from it when people compare Dune as kind of like a Star Wars story. But I understand where they're coming with that. But overall, let me know what you guys think about Dune Part 1. Are you guys excited for Dune Part 2? I am very excited. I hope I get to see it on opening day in 70 millimeter, because I think they're also doing it in 70 millimeter. But overall, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed my review on Dune Part 1, and I'll see you guys next week when I review Part 2. And again, if you guys like talking anything movies, TV shows, or video game related, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next review. Thank you.